conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome everybody to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Hopefully you had a great weekend. I know I did. We've got a big show for you today. Got a lot of things to cover. First, starting us off, Light Up Louisville happened over the weekend, and as usual, the left has to ruin everything that's amazing. We'll be talking, well, not amazing, but ruin every single holiday and public event. We'll be going over that. Additionally, the outgoing GOP chairman, who just removed himself from the position, Mac Brown, gave an interview to Wave 3, where he calls for party unity while simultaneously telling the majority of his party that he doesn't care about their opinions and they all need to move on from Trump. We'll have that today, as well as so much more. But first, I want to do a little bit of Andrew reviews. I know I did this, I think maybe Monday last week, so maybe we'll make it an ongoing thing. But I did over the weekend see the Daily Wire movie, Lady Ballers. I don't know if you all have heard of this, but it is a comedy movie about a all-male basketball team that was, high school champions, and they decide to identify, quote unquote, as women simply to win at basketball for some big tournament or something like that. It is a pretty funny comedy. I do encourage you to watch it, but if you're going to watch it, you got to make sure you're up on some of the leftist tropes. They have some jokes in there where they're making fun of things like Dylan Mulvaney, or they're making fun of course, Senator Elizabeth Warren, some jokes like that, where if you're unaware of just what, if you're just not culturally aware of those jokes, you maybe wouldn't find as many of those parts funny. If I had to rate the movie as far as, out of 10, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Some parts a little slow, but overall pretty good. I would suggest kids need to be probably at least 13 to 14 years old to really understand all of the parts of it, maybe a bit older. But that's just my suggestion. Maybe wait till kids are about 16 to watch the movie, but it definitely is pretty enjoyable. But getting down into it, the left ruins everything. They just got to ruin every major holiday. Perhaps, you may remember, like Thanksgiving this year, of course, we saw tons of articles from the leftist publications telling us that we're all murderers celebrating genocide and thieving of land and yada, yada, yada for celebrating Thanksgiving, trying to take that from us. I know during 4th of July, this year, for an example, prior years, there was big protests always from the left on whatever issue it is that year that they're complaining about. I think it was abortion or something last year before Roe v. Wade being overturned, and they take the 4th of July. So they've taken Thanksgiving, they've taken 4th of July, and now, of course, they are taking, not to mention too, on Thanksgiving, the Macy's Day Parade had to be diverted because pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas protesters had to glue their hands to the sidewalk. And make no mistake, this segment here, we're going to be talking about these pro-Hamas protesters. I've said this before. You don't need to. I don't really touch on national topics, but you don't need to, be in love with the state of Israel. You don't need to think we need to send money over there. You don't really need to think much at all about it. Outside of the fact we should all agree that obviously Hamas is a terrorist organization. The way they operate, the way they behave is they're animals, they're scum, they're horrible people. They have no morality to them. Their radical Islamic beliefs tell them that they can treat us infidels however they so wish. That is in their ideology. Make no mistake about it. That is who they are. And so to support that kind of group makes you a bad person. That's just my opinion. Hopefully you agree with me. If you don't, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry, but I have no idea why you don't agree with me. But anyways, To the point, though, these pro-Hamas protesters, because when you're asking for a ceasefire, when you're asking for that to stop after that attack, you're just not, you're the same type of person. Like, putting this in perspective, right? We were attacked on 9/11, and everybody here was generally like, yeah, go do what you need to do to kill Osama bin Laden, to take out Al-Qaeda, right? Obviously, that was demagogued into some larger wars that we don't necessarily have to agree with. But I would hope that all of us would agree, if Mexico or Canada or somebody ran into our country and killed a couple thousand people, we would all be in general agreement that that threat, that organization, can no longer be allowed to exist on our borders. And regardless however you feel about Israel, one thing is, you've got to say that Israel existing is a good thing for the Middle East. It's going to bring more stability to the area, as far as, a modern culture that isn't subjugating women and minorities and so on and so forth. But anyways, putting that to the side. And so these pro-Hamas protesters glued their hands to the street to move aside the Thanksgiving Day parade. That was this year. Well, and perhaps you may remember Light Up Louisville back in 2021 was interrupted by these Breonna Taylor, BLM protesters here. To remind you, here's something from that incident. Well, this year, back to ruin Light Up Louisville is new protesters. And what you'll see is a tweet here from a councilman, Anthony, how do you say that last name? Anthony Paggali. Well, anyways, a councilman out of Louisville tweeted out this image from Light Up Louisville. And what it shows is, it's the parade kind of coming through, and you see pro-Palestinian protesters holding up ceasefire and chanting to interrupt the Christmas Day parade, the Light Up Louisville event. Interrupting Christmas. And this kind of craziness is what makes people literally hate the left. Now, some people are aware of this, right? At least the Breonna Taylor stuff, they can say, hey, this is racism, and if you don't agree, shame on you. Or abortion, they think it pulled well. But these kinds of things, they don't pull well. They don't win people over. And the media knows it. You know how? So imagine, if you would, that a group of, neo-Nazis, pro-Second Amendment, or, neo-Nazi group, to go far, far, far right, what they call right, though I would argue Nazi groups are far left. But anyways, let's say that was interrupting parade, or not even going that extreme. Let's just say a pro-Second Amendment group. You've got this red flag gun law being pushed out there, and let's say they were running a protest during a parade. Do you think, for 1 second, we wouldn't know about it? Because outside of this councilman tweeting this out, you and I would be completely unaware of this even happening. Why? Because not a single news organization would cover it, because they know it is unpopular. They know the liberal viewpoints, when shown to their extremists, unpopular. They know it. We'll talk more about some of that evidence and why they won't cover it, and why Republicans need to grasp hold of that, instead of lacking the kind of leadership that we see out of people like Mac Brown giving this interview here after this upcoming break. As a reminder, you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. If you want to reach out to the show, express your sentiments, your feelings, so on and so forth, feel free to email me at info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can catch the Andrew Cooperrider Show Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on WZXI. And if you're not in the listening area of WZXI, which is 94.1 FM, 95.5 FM, and 1280 AM, if you're not in that listening area, have no fear. You can go ahead and log in to theandrewshow.com, and you'll see a player for WZXI there. You can catch it there. But if you miss it there too as well, don't worry. At 1 o'clock everywhere else, all major podcasting platforms, as well as Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble, you can also catch the day's episode. So you can always catch what we have to say Monday through Friday right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Well, I'll see you guys back here in just a few short minutes to kind of go over some more about this and to go over these spineless Republicans not seizing on the moment. We'll see you here in a few minutes. Listen up, my fellow business owners. You need to get your cybersecurity and IT support under control. Reach out to the folks at Amston today. Call 859-300-0087 or visit amston.com. It is no secret that cyber attacks have become a constant threat, and you need to make sure that your organization is protected. Amston has over 30 years of experience working with businesses and governments alike. Call 859-300-0087 or visit AmstonAMPSTUN.com today. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. Before the break, we were talking about the liberals, far-left crazies breaking up and interrupting Light Up Louisville with their pro-Palestinian protests. But more importantly, the fact that the media doesn't cover it. Just like the media really didn't cover something I talked about last week, which is where several large amount of pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian activists showed up at Lexington City Council to demand they issue a declaration that they don't support Israel and demand a ceasefire and all these other things. And, they don't want to cover these because they don't want to show what this liberal woke mind virus is in its final. This is it taken to its logical conclusion. Every time you start talking about a mentality or a political mindset, you have to remember that it will march on, and there is a point where it will be taken to its logical conclusion. And when you follow out the logic, a lot of times, especially with leftist viewpoints, people see the end and they're like, oh, this is pretty ugly. This is pretty awful. And you would think that really open up some really good opportunity for Republicans to win on a conservative message because they have superior ideas. You see, it's not that you win by saying, hey, look, here is our superior, let's change our message to whatever's popular, right? That shouldn't be your goal. If you're politically active, if you care about the direction of the country and everything else, you don't change your viewpoint on important things just in order to fit the people out there. No, you say, look, we need to stay strong to our conservative beliefs and push those forward. But this isn't what the Republican Party is capable of. This isn't what they do anymore. An exact example of this, we have an interview from Mac Brown, outgoing GOP chairman for the state, with Wave 3 saying a whole lot of things that simultaneously make no sense, drive apart the party while claiming he's all about party unity. That's not what he's for. We'll go over that in a bit. Before we dig into that, I want to point out a few things, okay? And those of you listening on the radio or audio versions won't see it, but on his lapel, when I play this video, you're going to see an American flag pin coupled with and next to a Ukrainian flag pin. We've seen this from McConnell and others where, despite the fact that the majority of Republicans that support funding the Ukraine war, right? Republicans that support funding of the Ukraine war is 39%. So only 39% of Republicans currently support funding of the Ukraine war. On top of that, the vast majority of Republicans support Trump. Okay. And I want to bring this up because as you go in and watch this video, I want you to hear what he says. Remember, he's got this Ukraine American flag pin. And we're going to return to this idea that these Republicans in power, they do not represent the Republican Party. That's why we're not getting things done. That's why the people, the voters, and the Republicans in power, there's such this divide going on. And what's worse is they believe they will lose power unless they forward this divide. Many of these people, I'll show you evidence of that. While in actuality, the reality is as long as they continue to do this is when they will lose power. How they lose power, how Republicans lose power, is by not following forward on conservative beliefs that the majority of them agree with, because you'll find Republican voters becoming apathetic. And so I want to play for you his interview I got one more thing I got to say, though, before I play for his interview. And I'm going to be honest. This is a little bit mean to say, but now that he's no longer the chairman or outgoing chairman, I feel more comfortable saying this publicly. And the only reason I bring this up is it's a little on the nose. I'm not normally one to even slightly make fun of somebody's appearance. You're born that way, you live that way, what have you. I'm not the most beautiful man in the world. My wife thinks I am. But I'm not the best looking man in the world. So I'm not normally one to make fun of the appearance. Though, not that I'm exactly making fun of the appearance. Anybody who's ever seen the movie Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's this bureaucratic race of aliens called the Vogons, and they run the entire planet. And it's all about how they're bureaucrats and they really got to fill out their paper, and they believe government exists on the government itself. It's not there to serve people. That order is all about creating these giant bureaucracies, and that's what they push forward. And it's a little on the nose for the fact that these Vogons, every time I see Mac Brown, it reminds me of these Vogons, not just because he kind of looks like a Vogon, but because it's on the nose, because this is the type of person he is. That's the type of thing he forwards. So let's listen to this interview here.
President Trump did some good things in his administration, and I think it's time to move on. And I think the sooner the party moves on from him, the sooner it will succeed.
Talking in his Louisville home, Brown criticizes what he calls drama and chaos of the Trump administration, saying what happened at the Capitol January 6th divided Republicans.
We need to move forward in who we pick for president, not backward. And I'm sure that a lot of people in Kentucky who don't agree with what I'm saying right now, because they're very dedicated to President Trump. This is a strong Trump state. But I'll also say this, we cannot live in this havoc.
One factor in that loss to Bashir, Brown says, was abortion. He said Republicans need to add exceptions to the state law restricting abortion to include rape and incest. David Mattingly, Wave News.
So what Mac Brown, so he said a few things in there that I think we really need to talk about, because this really shows exactly what these establishment hacks believe. He really pushed this across. And what's funny is he starts out by saying we have to move on from Trump. And he even acknowledges this isn't popular. And we'll go into why he thinks we should move on from Trump here in a bit. The real reason why he won't say out loud, of course, but I will tell you the real reason why. But then simultaneously, though, and like I said, we'll talk about this point too, he simultaneously, according to the announcer at the end, indicates that Republicans need to put in exemptions on abortion because he believes that's why they lost the election. So he simultaneously acknowledges that Trump's very popular, but yet the party, he simultaneously says Republicans need to change how they stand on a key issue, abortion, in order to win elections. But when it comes to Trump, however, despite the fact he is majorly popular in the state, well, we need to move on from Trump too as well. He says both these things. That shows there's no key principle. If you would say, well, Mac Brown is just about adopting whatever policy he believes he needs to win, well, he wouldn't be pushing the Ukraine war funding with his little pin there. And of course, he's publicly pushed it because that's not popular with the Republican base. It's not even popular with the majority of American people. Now you start looking at, that's countrywide. You start looking at just Kentucky. You're maybe only seeing 30 to 35% of Kentuckians that actually support continued funding of the Ukraine war. You only see 30 to 35% of voters that don't like Trump, that won't vote for Trump. Yet this major minority position that is actually held by a lot of more Democrats in the state than Republicans, hate of Trump, continue funding that war, is the very things Mac Brown disagrees with, is the very things he wants to change. But then on the flip side, a belief that the majority of Republicans have about abortion, on not allowing exemptions, he says, no, we need to change that to win elections. So he acknowledges he's holding positions that aren't popular, but somehow we need to sell those, but then turns around and when it comes to life, when it comes to murdering babies, that to him is something to give up on. So Trump, who's majorly popular, he says, no, we need to give up on that. Not funding the Ukraine war. He goes, no, we need to fund the Ukraine war. Those items are worth fighting for him. It is worth fighting for people like Mac Brown and other people in leadership to say, we need to get rid of Trump. We need to convince our voters to do that. We need to say things publicly about it. We need to win people over to that viewpoint. That's worth it to us. It's worth it to him to say, and this is Mitch McConnell too, we need funding for the Ukraine war. That's important to us. That's something we need to push. That's worth it to him. But when it comes to murdering babies, when it comes to abortion, it's not worth it to them. It's lower on their list of importance. And why is that? Because the other two items have to do with control. That is the continuing principle. That is all Mac Brown stands for. That is all Mitch McConnell stands for. That is all the leadership of the Republican Party stands for. It is power for the sake of power. You know, in the book, movie, whatever you watched of 1984, I've read both the book and watched the movie. There's a scene where the main character is being reprogrammed and tortured. And there's this conversation had about why do those in power continue to do these things to seek power? Why do they want control? What are they hoping to accomplish? And after some time, the torturer, the reprogrammer, says, it is power for the sake of power. That's it. There's nothing else we want but more power. And it's very hard for people like me and hopefully people like you who believe in a principle and standing for something that are Christians, maybe believe there's something beyond this, believe we have a higher calling than just to control others. People who have a real belief in liberty and freedom to comprehend and understand that it's all about power. And that's all that they will continue to push forward. You know, we're going to continue this conversation after this break on Mac Brown, what he had to say and how diabolical and how awful it actually is, these viewpoints. And the fact that he's willing to say it publicly tells you quite frankly why I'm very concerned about the Republican Party in this upcoming session. We'll be talking about that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. We'll be back in just a few short minutes.
Lexington Overstock Warehouse is Central Kentucky's best source for stylish new home furnishings. Don't pay retail. With our low overhead operating structure and big name brands, we offer the absolute best values on new furniture for every room. Shop online anytime at LexingtonOverstockWarehouse.com or visit our weekends only showroom located at 156 West Tiverton Way. Right now, for listeners of this show, we're offering a special discount for our online customers. Use coupon code FREEDOM for an additional 10% off your online order today. Lexington Overstock Warehouse, low overhead equals really low prices.
And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. For the break, I was talking about this Mac Brown interview with Wave 3 he gave, where he said a few things. He said first that we need to move on from Trump. He says that the drama and chaos really divided Republicans. And I think what this really is based on, this is something that I think these anti-Trumpers don't recognize. They blame Trump for the chaos. They blame Trump for the division. But they blame Trump for it because that is the outward sign. That chaos is that old-fashioned, that what you perceive as chaos is because the media complex, the liberal left media complex, has pushed Trump out there to make him appear chaotic, to make him appear like he's crazy, right? To push these narratives. And you see him repeating about January 6th really divided Republicans. It really didn't, though. The vast majority of Republicans look at January 6th as a protest where some members of it started to riot and misbehave, but the vast majority were just people there protesting, making their voices heard. That is what they view that as. And they keep that in context with just how crazy the left is. I mean, Black Lives Matter protests, the rioting, the burning down buildings, and of course, the unfair treatment of it. That is how actual Republicans view it, but that's not how Mac Brown views it, because it doesn't align anything to get rid of Trump. And the real reason, as I said before the break, is because of control. That's the only connecting line for people like Mac Brown. When you can't understand why the establishment Republicans especially do what they do, you just got to put yourself in the mindset that all they want is control. They don't have any principles. They don't believe in conservative values. They don't actually believe anything they're saying. They're just saying it because it's control. That's it. And they hate Trump because they can't control him. He doesn't need their money. He doesn't need to listen to him all the time. He does what he does, and that's really what the problem is. And so they'll suddenly grab a hold of this media that they complain about on everything else and say this is causing chaos. They'll point at things that, if they're honest with themselves, is not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, like January 6th, and say this is creating chaos. They latch on to those beliefs and the havoc he talks about. Any Republican that actually was in office doing conservative things, fulfilling Republican promises, not even all of them, just some of them, would be attacked in the same way by the media, because the media wants the Republicans as controlled opposition. That's what they want. Republicans are supposed to be controlled opposition for the liberals. That's all they're supposed to be. And the Republicans and part of the establishment enjoy that because they'll get power more often than not. Because when people look at the Democrats and they say, well, they're kind of crazy, they're reminded of it. The minute Democrats are in power, people suddenly realize at the national level, a lot of times, just how crazy they are. Look at the House, look at the Senate, right? Look how often Republicans have had control of the federal level. People see how crazy they are and they say, never mind, Republicans can have the power again. But then Republicans don't do anything, but the media makes a big deal about them doing nothing. And then that's how the Democrats get in, but the Republicans never roll back on the Democrat accomplishments. So they're able to continue on their forward march to the left. They're controlled opposition. And what's funny is you take somebody like Mac Brown to remind you what he said. He said, I know a lot of Kentuckians won't agree with what I'm saying, but we need to move on from Trump. That's what he said. Interesting. But then, as I said, he takes the same hold belief that we need to, however, change our viewpoint on abortion. And this isn't only him saying that. Trust me. Leadership in the House, leadership in the Senate is pushing this too. They're pushing this heavy to put exemptions in place. And if this bill even slightly comes up for a vote, take no mistake. Take no mistake. Members of leadership may even vote against it if they have primary opponents. But make no mistake, it is because of them that it's moved forward. And it's simply because they say, well, this is something. So they say, hey, I know that the Ukraine war is unpopular. I know Trump is popular, and getting rid of him and saying that isn't popular. But for my principle of power, I'm willing to say that and try to convince people to it. But murdering babies, well, maybe if we let you murder babies in some circumstances that work, that isn't the main principle is preserving life. Well, maybe perhaps for us, that will work because it helps us maintain that power. And it's this type of behavior is why on December 15th, they got those red flag gun laws going on, that hearing going on for it. And if it passes that committee, it means it will move forward for a vote to the greater body. So you need to make sure you're showing up. Capitol Annex, December 15th at 10 a.m. if you want to hold on to your guns. Because the very fact of the matter is that, once again, the Republicans have abandoned these principles completely. At least leadership has. They hold the power because they lack all conservative principles. They have no problem doing the bidding of the corporations. You know, the reason why people like Mac Brown are for the Ukraine war is because that's what the corporations want. That's what the military industrial complex wants. And that's where they get their money from. And the money is how they control the other people within the bodies, because they need the money to continue to sell the lie that they're conservative to people like you and me, the voters. People like you and me. They want to sell that lie. And so we will have this debate. They will have this, not debate, but they'll have this vote on red flag gun laws. And they'll stand there and abandon any kind of conservative principle of liberty or freedom and say, no, we need to pass this for safety because it's uncomfortable, right? It's people won't say out loud the very important thing that comes with things like freedom of speech and the Second Amendment. You hear Democrats going after freedom of speech as hate speech. You hear them going after owning guns as violent and awful, talking about individual safety because we as Republicans and conservatives won't be honest and say it out loud. Freedom means bad things will happen. And you can either trade your freedoms and your liberties for what you think is safety, but really you're just handing off control of your life to somebody who doesn't care about you at all, the government. People who only want power. Remember, they don't seek power to help you. They seek power for the sake of power. So you can either hand off control to them or you can continue to enjoy your freedoms and liberties, but bad things will sometimes happen. If you're a Christian at all, like I am, you understand this concept. God gives us free will. Bad things don't happen because of God. Bad things happen because of a lack of God. And we are given the choice and freedom to choose God or not because he has given us that free will. And in much the same way, you have freedom and liberty to make decisions. That means sometimes people are going to make the wrong decision. And bad things will happen. But instead of standing on a conservative principle of liberty, instead, what they want is for you to give up your liberty for a perception of safety. Because that's easier to sell. That's their principle. Remember, their principle is control. Not only is it easier to sell you giving up your liberties for safety, but also it helps them finish out their other goal, which is control. It gives them more control over you. That's why Republicans would push this forward. People ask me, they're like, Andrew, why are Republicans taking a vote on red flag gun laws? Because they don't actually believe anything they're saying to you. The vast majority of them don't. They don't care. They just don't care. And maybe you think your House rep or your state senator doesn't feel that way. But I tell you this much. One, if your state House rep or state senators in leadership, 100% they absolutely do feel that way. They 100% do. They will lie to you like nobody's business and sleep fine at night about it because it's control for the sake of control. They have no greater principles and they have no greater calling. I am telling you right now. Stay informed, stay on top of these things, and ask your legislators hard questions. And make sure you're showing up on December 15th at 10 a.m. Well, coming up after this, JCPS has missed over 1 million minutes of instruction time just in 17 days. We'll go over that after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. Now I've hammered enough on fake conservatives for the day, on our feckless leadership that we have that call themselves conservative in Kentucky. It's an atrocity that we even have to be worrying about the Second Amendment in a state where it's 80% Republican-controlled legislature. And some people ask me, Andrew, you've been focusing a lot on Republicans recently, and that is simply because we're going into the legislative session. And this is when Republicans are, quote unquote, mostly in power. Obviously, you have Republicans in all other constitutional offices, but the governor. But while Republicans are in session in the legislature, people believe that we have co-equal branches of government. You'll hear that. 3 co-equal branches of government. It ain't co-equal. The legislature is far more powerful than any other branch of government. They can defund literally the other 2 branches. They can impeach any member of the other 2 branches, but the other 2 branches can't defund or remove them from office. That's right. And so the point is that the reason why it's designed that way is because the legislature is the people's branch. It's made up with the most amount of elected people, and you have the greatest concentration of representative to voters, right? Instead of one governor for millions of people, you have one House rep for 45,000. That's why they're more powerful. There's more people elected, more people involved, and the citizens have more of a voice. And so while they're in session, when they're coming up on session, that is when they can do conservative things, and they can either hurt us or help us. And then from there, that's how you make your decisions during the primary. And I will continue to hammer these so-called conservatives in the state as long as they continue to do things like forward anti-conservative views on pro-life topics and anti-conservative views on the Second Amendment, two very important things: murder and the ability to protect yourself from all enemies, both foreign and domestic, because this is when they have their time to shine. And if Bashir's doing anything wrong during this point, guess what? The legislature can pass a law to stop it. If you hear a legislator at all complaining about literally anything Bashir does over the next 5 months, ask them what they're going to do about it, because they can pass a law to make it illegal. They can defund it. It's budget season. And if they're choosing not to do that, they're complaining to manipulate you. They're not complaining because they actually want a solution. But anyways, moving on. JCPS, terrible liberal ran school system. Well, it's come out that JCPS students have missed over 1 million minutes of instruction time in just 17 days. Compare this to the same time last year. It was only 300,000 minutes. So 700,000 more minutes of missed instruction time, all due, they say, to bus delays. In fact, JCPS has announced that they will not be doing delayed start at all this year. So sometimes during the winter months, if it snows real bad, maybe overnight or in the morning, they just need another hour or two to get the roads clear, salted, and cleared off, so that way the school buses can go out, pick kids up. Well, they're not doing it because of the way their bus system's set up. They can't do delayed starts anymore because they have the staggered bus system, and it becomes too confusing. Add that with the missed minutes, and you'll see why the conversation of the legislature coming in to split up JCPS has been renewed. Now, of course, JCPS says this is awful. What we really need is, one, we need all-day kindergarten and universal pre-K paid for by you, the taxpayer, because, of course, they can barely get kids to school now. So, of course, giving them more kids to get to school over more years is a fantastic way, absolutely wonderful way of fixing their problems, don't you think? Let's add more people to the mix. Yeah, you can't handle what you have. Let's add more people to the mix. But they'll say, well, we can handle it, but the legislature illegally doesn't fund transportation. What are they talking about here when they say this? Maybe you've heard it. Well, what they're saying is that the legislature doesn't line item transportation. So if you rewind to a few years ago, I guess under probably Democrats, a law was passed to say that the legislature would pay for 100% of transportation. And so they say, well, the legislature is illegally now not funding transportation because they're not giving a line item amount of money to the school districts that say transportation. Now, understand this. There is no such thing as the legislature breaking a state law when they pass a state law. It's physically impossible. When the legislature passes a new law or a budget bill or anything, school funding package, and if they don't have a line item that says funding transportation, well, it just rewrites the old law. There's no such thing as illegal. That's a stupid argument to begin with. It's silly, it's ridiculous, and it shows a complete lack of understanding of how the legislature even operates. They pass a law, and if there's an old law saying what they're doing is against the law, guess what? The old law gets changed. That is their job, to write laws. The only thing the state legislature has to follow is federal law, general ethics, and also as well the state constitution and federal constitution. They don't have to follow state law. But despite this, they blame the state for not funding JCPS enough, Jessamine County Public Schools enough. And despite the fact that JCPS spends over $20,000 a student, over $20,000 a student. They say, look, it's not enough money. Compare that to somewhere like, I don't know, Garrett County, that's spending $14,245 per student. I mean, JCPS is already pulling in over $6,000 more per student. That's how much more they're spending. And yet they say what we need is more students and more money. That's how we'll solve our problems. Well, call me crazy for not believing you, but I think you're full of it. I don't think that will solve your problems because I don't think it's a money issue. I think the leadership is corrupt and has their priorities all out of whack. You spend more money and time worrying about forwarding your crazy far left agenda items than you spend worrying about the kids. And the net result is JCPS students missing 1 million minutes of instruction time over just 17 days. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. You know, over the weekend there, I'm some leftist liberal, whatever, supposed pretend Christian made a post saying that, well, frankly, if you're fighting more for the right, the God-given right to defend yourself, Second Amendment, then, well, you are not a good Christian because you're not fighting enough over insulin. This is what he said. Reverend Benjamin Krimmer says, when access to guns becomes more important to us Christians than access to insulin, access to healthcare, or access to lunches at school, that is a sign of a broken Christianity. Well, first off, the entire premise is flawed. Last I checked, there's no situation where you have to fill out a background check to get insulin, healthcare, or a school lunch, an actual background check. There's nowhere where that happens. Quite a lot of times that has to happen for guns, of course, across the state. And, this goes back into what I was talking about last week, as well as a little bit earlier, about one, you don't have a God-given right to anybody else's labor, right? That's slavery. Okay, that was never enumerated in our Constitution. That's why you don't have a right to health care. You don't have a right to a school lunch. You don't even have a right to be fed. You don't have a right to housing. You don't have a right to these things because they have to come from somebody else. What you have a right is to, one, not have a government that gets in the way of you achieving those things. Two, you have a right to have your freedom of speech, your ability to speak your mind, and once again, your ability to defend yourself, your ability for government to not illegally search and seize, right? Your right to vote, your right to have a jury by peers before those are taken away. And our Constitution is clear. These are enumerated rights that everybody's born with. Our founders believed that this was given to us by God. If our founders read something like that, they would lose their minds. Because they'd say, yeah, it should be important for you to protect the Second Amendment. That's a God-given right. Now, of course, insulin prices, healthcare, school lunches, these are all important topics. But to somehow tie your viewpoints on those compared to your concern about things like the Second Amendment to your Christianity is false, out of control, wrong. There's no threat to school lunches going on right now. There's no threat to healthcare going on right now. The left is getting their way left and right. More and more people are qualifying for taxpayer-paid healthcare, but yet there is a threat to your ability to defend yourself. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. As always, if you want to reach out to the show, make sure you email us, info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, it's info@theandrewshow.com. Feel free also to visit theandrewshow.com to check out old shows, old episodes, and you can contact us there as well. Anyways, y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow